Okay, welcome back. So in this video, I'm going to be going over how to graph your data after you have collected it. And if you needed to take an average, you've already calculated your average. So I filled in this chart and calculated the averages already. So we're gonna take this chart and turn it into a graph so we can visually represent the data. All right, so all we're gonna really need is our independent variable and then the average from our dependent variable, because all these numbers basically get calculated into the average. So now in our class, you should have already in math plotted points on a coordinate plane by this point in your academic career. And in this class, we're only going to be dealing with the first quadrant. And if you don't remember what that is the quadrant where all my values along the x-axis are positive and all my values along the y-axis are also positive. So we should only really be dealing and measuring positive numbers in this class. You might end up calculating things that end up being negative, but when we're plotting them on the graph, we should be taking positive numbers. So, where do things go? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my independent variable, my mass, and put it along the x-axis. The independent variable, the one that we control, is always along the x-axis. And then the dependent variable, the variable that is dependent on what the independent variable should be, is always going to go along the y-axis. That is how we're going to do our graphs. So as our independent variable moves up and down, it will move right and left. And as the dependent variable moves up and down, it will literally move up and down on the graph. And we'll be able to see the relationship that way. Okay, so let's go over a few main mistakes that I see people doing when they start to graph their data. First of all, they'll just put the numbers down here and not put any units. So if I have mass, one easy way to correct this, if I'm recording mass, I'm recording mass in what units? Grams, pounds, ounces. I recorded it in pounds. It was really a weight measurement, but the reader will understand that it was recorded in pounds. Now, and then repetitions is a counting number. So I already kind of have the unit there. It's kind of a weird unit, but repetitions. Now, one major thing that I see people do is they'll just take the numbers and say, oh, okay, so I could just put 150, 160, 170, 180, and just kind of like plug them in along the little spots on the graph. And then I got 9, 12, 13, 15, 17. Now, if I do this, every single graph, no matter what I'm measuring, no matter if I'm measuring time, weight, reps, whatever, I'm gonna end up having this perfectly linear x equals y graph, and it won't really tell me anything. So this is not the way to go. I see a lot of people make this mistake where they're gonna put the values on their scales, whatever values that they have on their chart. So this is actually how we're going to be going about this. So the origin, if you remember the origin, that's where the axes meet, the y and the x, and z if you have it, are going to be at 0. So where they meet, it's going to be at 0. And I need my scale, which is where all the tick marks are, in order to fit all my data on the graph, I need it to be within the range. So let's do the y-axis first. So I've got the range is 9 to 17. So down here I got 0. So as long as it goes up to 17, let's see, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. Okay, that will fit because 18 is bigger than 17. So if I go by threes, that means each part of my scale is going to be the same distance apart visually, also the same distance apart by value. So I know if a value point goes up from this tick mark to this tick mark, it's the same distance or the same value as if it moved from this tick mark to this tick mark. It'll much better visually represent our data. Now, it can get a little bit awkward sometimes if I'm starting at 0 down here, because look, I have my range here is from 150 pounds to 190 pounds. So even if I did these tick marks, this scale down here by values of 50 pounds, 100 pounds, 150 pounds, 200 pounds, all my data points would fall somewhere between these two lines. It would be kind of hard to fit them. So there's a little trick we could do. We could cut out a piece of the line. So you see what I just did right here is I basically just made a little cut. I showed these little hash marks that shows there's a piece of the line that's missing because it's not relevant. So it allows us to basically zoom in to a part of the graph that accommodates the 50 to 190. So now maybe I can make these tick marks by 10. Let's do 150, 160, 170, 180. And the cut just tells me, hey, from 10 to 140, I don't really have any data points there. I'm going to zoom into this part of the graph. Otherwise, this graph would have to be really long, or these tick marks will have values a lot further apart. Now I can finally start putting stuff on my graph. So let's go ahead and do that. So my first value, I've got 150 pounds and 9 repetitions. So I'll line those up and put a dot there. My next one, 160 pounds and 12 repetitions. Okay, those line up pretty nicely too. 170 pounds and 13 repetitions, so I'll go to 170. And since I don't have a tick mark for 13, I know there's going to be 2 tick marks, like imaginary tick marks in between 12 and 15. So I'll just kind of guesstimate, a third of the way up between 12 and 15. So this dot should be higher than this dot. Then I will have 180 and 15, and those two should line up together, and they do. And then I have 190 pounds for my last one all the way up to 17. So right below the 18 tick mark value. All right, and I see like a linear regression. It's not perfect, and usually your data is not going to have some type of perfect line or perfect curve, but you should be able to see a trend if your independent variable and your dependent variable are related. If they're not related, then your hypothesis is definitely going to need to be revised. But anyway, this is how I want you to think about setting up your graphs. Here's an example, and we're going to do more practice with this in class.